Imagine a person who is not only a serial killer, but also a close friend of his victims, a well-respected name in the city, and, on top of that, a doctor. This is the astonishing story of Dr. Harold Shipman, a man who didn't use his clinic to save lives, but to take them. In a small town called Hyde, England, with a population of just 30,000, he carried out his serial killings right under everyone's noses for 27 years. Even after sending over 250 people to their deaths, no one ever suspected Dr. Harold Shipman, and perhaps he would have never been caught, if not for one small mistake. What was his reason for killing? How did he remain undetected for so long? And what crucial clue did the police find that exposed years of brutal murders in an instant? The total population of Hyde was around 30,000, and out of them, nearly 3,000 were Dr. Shipman's patients. He primarily targeted elderly individuals who lived alone, people whose deaths wouldn't raise suspicion. Dr. Shipman gave these patients an unusual amount of attention. He would visit them at their homes, listen to their concerns, and make them feel valued. He assured them that even though they were alone, he was always there to listen. Some patients trusted him so much that they even handed over their house keys to him. Because of his caring nature, Shipman became highly respected in Hyde. People believed he could heal the elderly just by talking to them. But behind this facade, he was secretly extracting information: who lived alone, how much wealth they had, what properties they owned, and where their relatives lived. Once Shipman was satisfied with his findings, he would administer a lethal overdose of medication, killing his patients. Since most of his victims were already over 80 years old, their deaths appeared natural, and no one ever suspected foul play. For many years, Dr. Shipman continued his killing spree without arousing even the slightest suspicion. He might have never been caught until he made a crucial mistake. Dr. Shipman began his medical career in a town called Pontefract, about 70 kilometers from Hyde, where he worked at a hospital. In 1974, he left Pontefract and moved to Todmorden, securing a position as a general practitioner at the Abraham Medical Center. It was during his time at this clinic that he was first caught for suspicious behavior. He was found prescribing unusually high quantities of a drug called pethidine, a powerful painkiller with addictive properties. However, Shipman wasn't prescribing it for his patients' benefit. He was addicted to it himself. He would write prescriptions for pethidine, give a small dose to his patients, and keep the majority for his own use. The patients, unaware of what was happening, would feel much better after taking the medication, not realizing that they were experiencing a drug-induced high. This created a psychological dependence, making them feel drawn to Shipman without understanding why. Eventually, his actions caught up with him. The hospital administration discovered his fraudulent prescriptions and dismissed him. His case nearly led to the cancellation of his medical license, but Shipman managed to avoid severe consequences. He paid a fine of £600 and voluntarily checked himself into a rehabilitation center, an act that saved his medical license and allowed him to continue practicing. After spending a short time in rehab and fading from public memory, Shipman resurfaced in 1977, moving to Hyde, where he secured a position as a general practitioner at the Donnybrook Medical Center. By 1980, he was practicing regularly as a GP. However, during this time, he neither gave up his drug addiction nor stopped secretly murdering elderly patients whenever he found the opportunity. The frequency of his killings increased significantly in 1993 when he opened his own clinic in Hyde. With no one overseeing his actions, he quickly gained a strong reputation in the community, which allowed him to continue his crimes for years without suspicion. It wasn't until March 1998 that someone finally raised concerns. Dr. Linda Reynolds, a physician working at the Brooke Surgery, a hospital located across from Shipman's clinic, noticed an unusually high death rate among Shipman's patients. She found it alarming that a small private clinic like Shipman's had recorded 16 patient deaths in just 3 months. In contrast, Brooks Surgery, which had 3 times as many patients as Shipman's clinic, had reported only 14 deaths in the same period. Her suspicions deepened when she discovered that all 16 of Shipman's deceased patients had been cremated rather than buried, erasing potential forensic evidence. This led her to question whether these deaths were truly natural or if something sinister was happening right under their noses. Dr. Linda Reynolds documented her suspicions in a detailed report and submitted it to the coroner in Manchester. In her report, she pointed out that most of the 16 deceased patients were elderly women who were found dead in their homes. She emphasized that it was too much of a coincidence that Dr. Shipman was often the only person present at the time of their deaths. Dr. Linda also noted a strange pattern. When people die of natural causes at home, they are usually found in bed. However, Shipman's patients were often discovered sitting in chairs, fully dressed, as if they had simply passed away while going about their day. Furthermore, in many cases, Shipman was either already inside their home when they died, or was the first to discover the body upon arrival. This, she argued, was far from normal. Based on her report, an investigation was launched. However, due to a lack of solid evidence, the police were unable to prove any wrongdoing. With no concrete proof against Shipman, the case was closed after just 1 month. When Dr. Harold Shipman's patients died, he would personally handle the necessary paperwork, making it easy for him to cover his tracks. He was responsible for signing Form B, a document that the attending doctor fills out to confirm the cause of death. However, the real issue was Form C, which required a second doctor's signature for verification. In most cases, Shipman managed to get these forms signed by his friends or doctors who trusted him completely and never questioned his judgment. By doing this, he was able to falsify information on death certificates and send the bodies for cremation without raising suspicion. This flawed process allowed multiple deaths to go uninvestigated. It was one of the key reasons why Shipman was able to continue his killing spree for so long without anyone noticing. After the initial investigation was closed, Shipman continued his killing spree, claiming 3 more victims. However, his time was running out. His final mistake was about to bring his dark secret into the light. His last known victim was Kathleen Grundy, an 81-year-old former mayor of Hyde. On June 24, 1998, she was found dead in her home. As always, Dr. Shipman was the last person to see her alive. He later signed her death certificate, citing old age as the cause of death. Kathleen's daughter, Angela Woodruff, a lawyer by profession, became suspicious when she discovered her mother's will. The document stated that Kathleen had left her house to Dr. Shipman, a shocking detail considering Shipman had been close to the family. However, Angela's real suspicion arose when she noticed a critical inconsistency. Her mother owned 2 houses, but the will only mentioned 1. This suggested that the will had been forged by someone who was unaware of the second property, and that someone was likely Shipman. Angela immediately reported her concerns to the police, urging them to reopen the investigation. The authorities exhumed Kathleen Grundy's body and sent it for an autopsy. The results were damning. Her body contained lethal doses of diamorphine, also known as heroin. When the police questioned Shipman, he claimed that Kathleen was a drug addict and that he had recorded this information in his computer before treating her. However, this lie quickly fell apart, leading investigators to dig deeper into Shipman's past. Dr. Shipman had recently started making entries in a computerized medical journal, but he was unaware of one crucial detail. While he could manually enter a patient's death date, the computer automatically saved the last edit date of the file. When the police examined his computer records, they discovered that Shipman had made the entry about Kathleen Grundy's supposed drug addiction only after her death. This was irrefutable proof that he was trying to cover his tracks.
But that wasn't all. Investigators also found the typewriter used to forge Kathleen's will. They made this discovery by comparing the typewritten will with Shipman's typewriter. Some of the characters on his typewriter were misaligned or damaged, and the same errors appeared in the fake will. This provided undeniable evidence that Shipman had forged the document himself. With enough evidence in hand, the police arrested Dr. Harold Shipman on September 7, 1998. Once his crimes became public, many families who had previously lost loved ones under Shipman's care came forward. Some had always felt something was suspicious about their relatives' sudden deaths, but they had been too afraid to speak out against a respected doctor in their town. Now, they finally had a voice, and justice was about to be served. The investigation team was able to uncover a disturbing pattern in Dr. Harold Shipman's activities. He would administer fatal doses of diamorphine to his patients and falsify their death certificates, attributing their deaths to natural causes, such as old age. By signing the death certificates himself and authorizing the cremation, Shipman ensured that all evidence would be destroyed after the bodies were burned. The investigation into Shipman's practices involved a meticulous review of medical records, death certificates, and other documents related to the patients under his care. The team also interviewed the families of the deceased to gather further insight into the circumstances surrounding their loved ones' deaths. In some cases, exhuming bodies for forensic postmortems revealed the extent of Shipman's crimes. Between 1975 and his arrest in 1998, Shipman was confirmed to have killed 218 patients. This number, though, could be much higher, with estimates suggesting that he may have been responsible for as many as 260 deaths. The full scope of his actions remained elusive in some cases due to a lack of concrete evidence. The court sentenced Dr. Shipman to death 15 times for the murders of 15 patients, meaning he would never leave prison as long as he lived. However, he ended up hanging himself with a bedsheet tied to the bars of his cell. After his death, a fellow inmate made a shocking revelation. Shipman had actually killed not 218 or 260, but 508 people. He had confided this in the inmate himself. Despite this admission, the true reason behind Shipman's massive killing spree remains unclear. Some people call him a psychopath. Others believe it was a way for him to make money, and some attribute it to the impact of his mother's death. His mother, a cancer patient, was given morphine as a painkiller. Experts believe that Shipman might have wanted to see his patients die in the same way, by administering morphine and watching them pass away.